In the heart of New York City, there lived a man who had everything money could buy. He was one of those people you'd read about in magazines, rich, successful, and seemingly perfect. His penthouse overlooked Central Park, his bank account had more zeros than most people could count, and his business empire spanned continents. But behind the polished exterior of this millionaire's life lay a story that no magazine would ever cover, a story about family, trust, and unexpected twists. This man, let's call him David, wasn't just a CEO with a fancy title. He was also a husband and a new father. Life seemed to be going exactly as planned until recently. His wife, tired but happy after giving birth to their first child, found herself struggling with health issues. The joy of welcoming a baby into the world quickly turned into sleepless nights filled with worry. She couldn't care for the newborn full-time, which meant someone else had to step up. That person happened to be Rosa, the maid who had been working for the family for years. Rosa wasn't your typical housekeeper. From day one, she brought warmth and kindness to the home. She didn't just clean or cook, she made sure everyone felt cared for. Over time, she became part of the family in ways that went beyond her job description. When the baby arrived, Rosa naturally took on extra responsibilities without being asked. She helped change diapers, prepared bottles, and stayed up late when the parents needed rest. No one thought twice about it because Rosa always did what needed to be done quietly and efficiently. But one evening, something happened that would change everything. David came home earlier than usual after canceling a meeting. It wasn't often he got back before dinner, so the house felt unusually quiet. As he walked through the door, he heard soft murmurs coming from the nursery. Curious, he tiptoed closer, expecting to see his wife feeding the baby. What he saw instead stopped him dead in his tracks. There, sitting in the dimly lit room, was Rosa. She was holding the tiny bundle that was his son close to her chest, and she was breastfeeding him. For a moment, David couldn't believe his eyes. His mind raced with questions. Why was she doing this? How dare she take such liberties? Who gave her permission to act like she was the mother? Anger bubbled inside him, but strangely enough, he didn't say anything right away. Instead, he stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. What struck him most wasn't just the shock of seeing Rosa feed his child, it was the expression on her face. There was no arrogance or defiance in her actions. Instead, she looked peaceful, almost serene. Her eyes were closed and her lips curved into a faint smile, as if she were cherishing every second of holding the baby. It was a look of pure love, the kind only a parent can give. And for some reason, that softened David's initial anger. Still, he couldn't shake off the confusion swirling in his head. Was this appropriate? Did she think she could replace his wife? Or worse, did she think she belonged in their family? These thoughts gnawed at him as he backed out of the room silently, deciding not to confront her immediately. Something told him to wait, to think things through before jumping to conclusions. That night, David barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Rosa's face, the tenderness in her gaze, the way she held the baby so gently. He replayed the image over and over again, trying to make sense of it all. By morning, he knew he couldn't ignore what he had seen. But instead of reacting impulsively, he decided to dig deeper. Maybe there was more to Rosa than met the eye. Maybe there was a reason she had done what she did. Little did David know, this single moment would set off a chain of events that would challenge everything he believed about family, loyalty, and what it truly means to care for another human being. What started as an ordinary evening was about to become the beginning of a journey neither he nor Rosa could have anticipated. The next morning, David couldn't get the image of Rosa out of his mind. He kept replaying the scene in his head, her sitting in that rocking chair, cradling his son, feeding him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. his emotions were a tangled mess. On one hand, he felt protective, almost territorial, about his family. This was his child, and no one else should have been doing something so intimate without permission. But on the other hand, there was that look on Rosa's face, the quiet love, the unspoken devotion that made him pause. He decided to dig deeper. If he was going to understand why Rosa had done what she did, he needed to know more about her. Who was this woman who had been working in his home for years? What kind of life had she lived before stepping foot into his house? David wasn't the type to pry into people's personal lives, but this situation was different. It wasn't just curiosity driving him, it was confusion, guilt, and maybe even a little fear. Fear of having judged someone too quickly. Fear of not seeing the whole picture. David called his assistant early that morning and gave him a task. Find out everything possible about Rosa. Where was she from? What brought her here? Did she have any family? The assistant, surprised by the unusual request, got to work immediately. By late afternoon, David had a folder on his desk filled with details about Rosa's life, details that would leave him speechless. Rosa came from a small village in the Philippines. Her story was one of resilience and heartbreak. She had trained as a nurse back home, working long hours in underfunded hospitals where resources were scarce. Life hadn't been easy for her, but she had always found joy in helping others. That changed when tragedy struck. Rosa had given birth to her own child, a baby boy, but shortly after, he passed away due to complications that could have been prevented with better medical care. The loss shattered her. Unable to bear the pain of staying in the same place where her son had been born and died, she saved up every penny she could and moved to America, hoping for a fresh start. When Rosa first arrived in the U.S., she struggled. She didn't speak much English, and jobs were hard to come by. For a while, she worked odd jobs, cleaning offices, washing dishes, anything to make ends meet. Eventually, she landed a position as a live-in maid for a wealthy family. That job led to another and then another until she ended up working for David's household. Over the years, she became more than just an employee. She became a trusted presence, someone who noticed when things weren't right and stepped in without being asked. But none of that explained why she had breastfed his son. Or so David thought until he read further into the report. According to the information gathered, Rosa hadn't acted out of malice or entitlement. Far from it. The night David walked in on her, Evelyn, the baby's mother, was resting because she hadn't been feeling well. There was no formula left in the house and the stores were closed. Faced with a hungry, crying baby and no immediate solution, Rosa made a split-second decision. She knew her body could provide what the baby needed, so she fed him. It was a selfless act, born out of desperation and compassion. Rosa hadn't stopped to think about whether it was appropriate or how others might react. All she cared about in that moment was making sure the baby didn't go hungry. And once she started, she realized how much it meant to her to hold a child again, to feel the connection she had lost when her own son passed away. As David read through the report, his anger began to fade. In its place came a wave of guilt. How could he have assumed the worst about her? How could he have jumped to conclusions without knowing the full story? Here was a woman who had faced unimaginable loss, yet still chose to pour her love and energy into caring for his family. She wasn't trying to overstep boundaries. She was simply doing what she thought was best in a difficult situation. By the time David finished reading, his perspective had shifted completely. He realized that Rosa wasn't just a maid, she was a human being with her own struggles, dreams, and capacity for love. And while her actions may have been unconventional, they came from a place of genuine care. That evening, David sat alone in his study, staring at the folder on his desk. He thought about all the times Rosa had gone above and beyond for his family. The way she stayed late when Evelyn needed help. The way she anticipated their needs before they even voiced them. She had never asked for recognition or praise. She just did her job and more. David knew he had to talk to her. Not as an employer, confronting an employee, but as one person speaking to another. He wanted to hear her side of the story, to give her a chance to explain herself. But more importantly, he wanted to thank her for everything she had done. Both seen and unseen dot as he prepared himself for the conversation, David couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? Would Rosa be defensive? Embarrassed? Would she quit out of shame? Or would she open up and share the truth behind her actions? Whatever the outcome, David knew one thing for certain: this moment would change the dynamics of his household forever. The next day, David decided it was time to have a conversation with Rosa. He didn't want to rush into anything. He needed to approach this carefully. This wasn't just about finding out what had happened. It was about understanding her as a person and figuring out how to move forward. Early in the morning, before the household woke up, he knocked on Rosa's door. She opened it, looking surprised to see him standing there. "Can we talk?" David asked, his tone calm but serious. Rosa nodded hesitantly, stepping aside to let him in. The room was small and simple, reflecting her modest lifestyle. A few family photos hung on the wall. One of them caught David's eye. It was a picture of a young woman holding a baby, smiling brightly despite the faded quality of the image. He guessed it was Rosa with her son. David took a deep breath and began. "Rosa, I need to ask you something. Something important." His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the weight behind his words. Rosa stiffened slightly, sensing that this wasn't going to be an ordinary conversation. "I saw what happened the other night," he continued, "in the nursery. With my son." For a moment, Rosa froze. Her eyes widened, and she looked like she wanted to disappear. But then she lowered her gaze, nodding slowly. "Sir, I know it wasn't my place," she said quietly, her voice trembling, "but I didn't know what else to do. Your wife was resting, and there was no formula left. I couldn't let the baby cry like that, not when I could help." David listened intently, letting her speak without interrupting. He could hear the sincerity in her voice, the raw emotion bubbling beneath the surface. "It wasn't planned," Rosa went on, tears welling up in her eyes. "I swear, sir, I never meant to overstep. I couldn't bear to see him hungry, and once I started, I realized." Her voice trailed off, and she wiped her tears quickly, embarrassed. "You realized what?" David prompted gently. Rosa hesitated, as if unsure whether she should say more. Finally, she whispered, "It felt like holding my own child again. For a little while, it reminded me of what I lost, of who I used to be." That admission hit David harder than he expected. He had read about Rosa's past, the tragedy she endured, the sacrifices she made, but hearing her say it aloud brought a new level of clarity. Here was a woman who had suffered unimaginably, yet still found a way to pour her love into caring for others. In that moment, she wasn't just a maid or an employee. She was someone who understood loss and longing in a way David couldn't fully grasp. "I'm not angry," David said after a pause. "Not anymore, at least. At first, I was confused, even upset. But now I understand why you did it. You acted out of kindness, not selfishness. And for that, I owe you an apology." Rosa looked up sharply, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. "An apology? Sir, no, you don't need to apologize. I'm the one who overstepped." "No," David interrupted firmly. "You didn't overstep. You stepped in when no one else could. You put my son's needs above your own comfort, and that takes courage. What I did wrong was assume the worst without knowing the whole story. So thank you for everything you've done for my family." A tear slid down Rosa's cheek, and she quickly brushed it away. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I promise I'll always do my best for your family, always." David nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. But he wasn't done yet. As he stood up to leave, he turned back to Rosa and said, "There's one more thing. I've been thinking about how much you mean to us, not just as someone who works here, but as part of our family. From now on, I want you to feel like you belong here completely, not just as a maid, but as someone we trust and rely on." Rosa's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," David replied with a warm smile. "Just keep being you. That's more than enough." Over. The next few days, David made good on his promise. He increased Rosa's salary significantly, ensuring she wouldn't have to worry about financial struggles ever again. He also arranged for her to receive health benefits and additional perks usually reserved for senior staff members. But beyond the material changes, he made sure Rosa felt valued in ways that money couldn't buy. He included her in family discussions, asked for her input on decisions involving the baby, and encouraged Evelyn to lean on her whenever she needed support. Evelyn, too, embraced the change wholeheartedly. At first, she was hesitant, unsure how to process what had happened. But after talking to David and seeing how much Rosa cared for their son, she realized something important. Rosa wasn't trying to replace her. She was simply filling a gap when it mattered most. Slowly but surely, Evelyn began to see Rosa not just as a helper, but as a partner in raising their child. Together, the three of them formed an unspoken bond, a team united by love and shared responsibility. As weeks turned into months, the household dynamic shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. Rosa became more than just a familiar face. She became a cornerstone of the family. Whether it was rocking the baby to sleep, preparing meals, or offering quiet advice during tough moments, she was always there, ready to lend a hand or a shoulder to cry on. Of course, not everyone reacted positively to these changes. Some of the other staff members grew jealous of Rosa's newfound status. Whispers spread through the house, accusing her of playing favorites or using emotional manipulation to gain favor. Others questioned whether it was appropriate for a maid to be so deeply involved in the family's personal life. But Rosa handled the criticism with grace, focusing on her work and staying true to herself. Over time, even her detractors began to soften, unable to deny the genuine care and dedication she brought to everything she did. Meanwhile, David found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned from this experience. Before Rosa's act of selflessness, he had viewed success purely in terms of wealth and accomplishments. But now, he saw things differently. True success, he realized, wasn't about how much you earned or achieved. It was about the connections you built and the impact you had on those around you. Rosa had taught him that compassion and humility were far more valuable than any business deal or luxury item. One evening, as David watched Rosa play with his son on the living room floor, laughter filling the air, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. This woman, who had once been invisible in the background, had become an irreplaceable part of his life. And though he would never forget the shock of discovering her breastfeeding his baby, he knew now that it had been a blessing. In disguise, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected acts can reveal the deepest truths about humanity. As the months went by, life in the household settled into a new rhythm. The bond between Rosa, the millionaire father, and his wife grew stronger with each passing day. What had once been an employer-employee relationship transformed into something deeper, a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared responsibility. But as much as things seemed to improve within the walls of their home, The outside world wasn't quite ready to accept this unusual arrangement. Word eventually got out about what had happened. It started innocently enough, a casual comment from one of the staff members at a dinner party, a whispered rumor overheard by a neighbor. Before long, the story spread like wildfire through their social circle. People were divided in their opinions. Some admired the family's decision to embrace Rosa as part of their inner circle, praising them for their compassion and open-mindedness. Others, however, weren't so kind. They criticized the millionaire for blurring professional boundaries and accused him of being too lenient. A few even suggested that Rosa might be taking advantage of the situation, though no one could point to any evidence to support such claims. The media caught wind of the story soon after. Tabloids latched onto it with glee, sensationalizing every detail they could find. Headlines screamed things like, "Millionaire lets maid breastfeed his baby," or "From servant to second mother, the shocking truth." Paparazzi began camping outside the house, hoping to catch a glimpse of Rosa or snap photos of her interacting with the baby. For a while, it felt like the entire city was talking about them. The constant attention took its toll on everyone. The millionaire found himself fielding questions from business associates and friends alike, many of whom wanted to know if the rumors were true. Some even questioned his judgment, suggesting that his actions might reflect poorly on his leadership skills. Evelyn, who had already been dealing with the challenges of motherhood, struggled under the weight of public scrutiny. She hated the idea of people judging her choices or questioning her ability to care for her own child. Even Rosa, usually so composed and humble, began to feel the pressure. She tried to keep her head down and focus on her work, but it was hard not to notice the stares and whispers whenever she left the house. Despite the chaos swirling around them, the family refused to let the negativity tear them apart. They leaned on each other for support, drawing strength from the love and unity they had cultivated. The millionaire made a conscious effort to shield Rosa from the worst of the backlash. He gave interviews to reputable outlets, explaining the circumstances behind Rosa's actions and emphasizing her selflessness. "This isn't about scandal or drama," he told one reporter. "It's about doing what's best for my child and recognizing the incredible woman who stepped up when we needed her most." Evelyn also spoke out, defending Rosa whenever someone dared to criticize her. At a charity gala where gossip ran rampant, she stood up during a quiet moment and addressed the room. "Rosa is more than just our maid," she said firmly. "She's family. She's helped us through some of the hardest times we've ever faced, and I'll never forget that. If anyone has a problem with how we choose to run our household, that's their issue, not ours." Her words resonated with many, silencing some of the harshest critics. Still, not everyone was convinced. Among the staff, tension simmered. A few housekeepers and cooks grew resentful of Rosa's elevated status, spreading rumors about favoritism and unfair treatment. One afternoon, Rosa overheard two colleagues whispering in the kitchen, "Why does she get special treatment?" One muttered, "She's just a maid, same as us." Rosa didn't respond. Instead, she continued going about her duties with the same quiet dedication she always had. Over time, her patience and kindness won over even her skeptics. When a younger maid fell ill and needed help covering her shifts, Rosa volunteered without hesitation. When the gardener accidentally damaged an expensive plant, she quietly cleaned up the mess before anyone noticed. Her actions spoke louder than any argument ever could, proving that her loyalty to the family came from a genuine place. Through all the ups and downs, the baby thrived. He grew healthier and happier with each passing month, surrounded by love from every corner of the household. Rosa played a central role in his development, teaching him simple songs in her native language and sharing stories from her childhood. The millionaire often joked that his son would grow up bilingual thanks to Rosa's efforts. And while Evelyn still grappled with moments of insecurity, wondering if she was doing enough as a mother, she found comfort in knowing that Rosa was there to share the load. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and bathed the penthouse in golden light, the millionaire sat on the couch with Evelyn and Rosa, watching the baby giggle and crawl across the floor. "You know," he said thoughtfully, breaking the peaceful silence, "I think we're setting a good example here. Not just for ourselves, but for others too. We're showing that families don't have to look a certain way to be strong. They just have to be built on love." Evelyn smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And honesty," she added. "We've been honest with each other through all of this, even when it was hard." Rosa nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. "And forgiveness," she said softly. "Forgiveness makes everything possible." In that moment, none of them cared about the tabloids or the critics or the gossip. All that mattered was the little boy laughing in front of them, the living proof that love knows no boundaries, that kindness can overcome prejudice, and that sometimes the most unexpected acts lead to the greatest blessings. But the story didn't end there. Inspired by Rosa's resilience and the lessons he had learned, the millionaire decided to take action. He realized that Rosa's struggles, her journey from loss to hope, her sacrifices along the way weren't unique. Countless caregivers and single mothers around the world faced similar challenges every day, often without recognition or support. Determined to make a difference, he launched a foundation dedicated to helping these unsung heroes. The foundation provided scholarships for women seeking education and training, offered financial assistance to struggling families, and partnered with organizations to improve access to healthcare and childcare resources. Through fundraisers and awareness campaigns, the millionaire highlighted the vital role caregivers play in society, challenging stereotypes and encouraging others to value their contributions. Years later, when the baby grew into a bright and curious toddler, Rosa remained a beloved figure in the household. She attended school plays, cheered at soccer games, and celebrated birthdays with the same enthusiasm as any doting parent. Neighbors who had once judged her now greeted her warmly, acknowledging the positive influence she had on the family. And though the scars of public scrutiny never fully faded, the experience only strengthened the bonds between Rosa, the millionaire, and Evelyn. Looking back on that fateful night when everything changed, the millionaire couldn't help but smile. What had started as a shocking discovery had blossomed into something beautiful, a testament to the power of empathy, gratitude, and human connection. In the end, it wasn't wealth or fame that defined him, it was the family he had built. Brick by brick, with the help of a woman who reminded him that true success lies in lifting others up. Years passed, and the baby who had once been cradled in Rosa's arms grew into a lively, curious little boy. He was the heart of the household, a bundle of energy with a laugh that could light up even the darkest room. Every milestone he reached, his first steps, his first words, his first day at school, was celebrated not just by his parents, but also by Rosa. She wasn't just a caregiver anymore. She was family. To the boy, she was Auntie Rosa, the woman who told him bedtime stories, taught him how to tie his shoes, and always had a snack waiting for him when he came home. The millionaire often found himself watching Rosa interact with his son. There was something magical about the way she spoke to him, not as a maid or an employee, but as someone who truly loved him. Her voice carried wisdom, patience, and warmth. She didn't just teach him facts or skills. She taught him kindness, empathy, and gratitude. In many ways, she shaped the person he was becoming. And though the millionaire had once worried about what others might think of their unconventional family dynamic, those fears now felt trivial. What mattered most was the love they shared, and it showed in every hug, every laugh, every moment they spent together. But Rosa's impact didn't stop at the boy. Over time, her presence began to change the millionaire and Evelyn too. They learned to see the world differently, to notice the quiet acts of service that often went unnoticed, to value people for who they were rather than what they did. The millionaire, once driven solely by ambition and success, started prioritizing relationships over profits. He made a habit of listening more, asking questions, and showing appreciation for the people around him. Evelyn, meanwhile, embraced a new sense of confidence. With Rosa by her side, she no longer doubted her abilities as a mother. Together, they formed a team that supported each other through thick and thin. As the years rolled on, Rosa's story became a source of inspiration beyond the walls of the household. The foundation the millionaire had launched grew into a powerful force for good, reaching thousands of caregivers and families across the globe. Scholarships helped women pursue education and training. Financial aid programs eased the burden on struggling households, and healthcare initiatives provided access to resources that saved lives. Rosa herself became involved in the foundation's work, sharing her experiences at events and encouraging others to keep going despite hardship. Her speeches were simple yet profound. "I'm not special," she would say, standing before crowds of people who hung on her every word. "I've made mistakes, faced losses, and struggled like everyone else. But I believe that we all have something to give, something that can make a difference in someone's life. Sometimes it's as small as feeding a hungry child. Other times it's offering a listening ear or a helping hand. Whatever it is, don't be afraid to give it, because you never know how far your kindness will go." People listened. They saw themselves in Rosa's story, their struggles, their hopes, their dreams. Many walked away feeling inspired to do more, to be better. Teachers, nurses, social workers, and volunteers began stepping forward, eager to contribute in any way they could. The ripple effect of Rosa's selflessness spread farther than anyone could have imagined. Back at home, life continued to evolve. The millionaire's business empire flourished, but he no longer measured success by numbers alone. Instead, he looked at the smiles on his son's face, the pride in Evelyn's eyes, and the joy in Rosa's laughter. Those moments meant more to him than any boardroom victory ever could. Even their neighbors, who had once whispered behind closed doors, now greeted them warmly, acknowledging the strength of their bond. Some even admitted that the family's openness had challenged their own preconceived notions about class, privilege, and community. Of course, challenges still arose from time to time. Growing older brought its own set of difficulties for Rosa. Her body, worn down by years of hard work, began to slow. Simple tasks like climbing stairs or carrying groceries became harder. Yet she refused to let age define her. With the support of the family, she adapted, finding new ways to stay involved. She started teaching the boy traditional recipes from her homeland, passing down flavors and memories that connected him to his roots. She also spent hours reading to him, introducing him to books she had cherished as a child. Through these activities, she ensured that her legacy would live on, not just in the lessons she taught, but in the values she instilled. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, the millionaire called everyone to the balcony for a surprise. The boy ran ahead, tugging Rosa's hand as he led her outside. Evelyn followed close behind, holding a tray of sparkling drinks. When they were all gathered, the millionaire cleared his throat and smiled. "I want to thank you all," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Each of you has played a role in making this family what it is today. Evelyn, for being the strongest partner I could ask for. My son, for reminding me every day why we do what we do. And Rosa. He paused, turning to look at her directly. Rosa, for everything. You came into our lives as a helper, but you stayed as so. Much more. You've taught us about love, sacrifice, and resilience. Without you, none of this would be possible. Tears welled up in Rosa's eyes as she shook her head. No, sir, she said softly. It's because of you and your family that I found my purpose again. Thank you for letting me be part of your journey. The moment was tender, raw, and deeply human. It reminded them all of how far they'd come from that fateful night years ago to the unbreakable bond they now shared. As they clinked glasses and laughed under the stars, it was clear that their story wasn't just about one act of kindness. It was about the chain reaction it sparked, a reminder that compassion has the power to transform lives. In the years that followed, the millionaire often reflected on the twists and turns of his journey. He thought about the night he walked into the nursery and saw Rosa breastfeeding his son. At the time, he had been shocked, confused, even angry. But looking back, he realized it was the beginning of something extraordinary. That single act of selflessness had opened his eyes to a truth he hadn't fully understood before. Family isn't defined by blood or titles, it's defined by love. And sometimes, the people who shape us the most are the ones we least expect. When the boy grew older and asked about Rosa, the millionaire told him everything about her past, her sacrifices, and the role she played in their lives. She's not just Auntie Rosa, he explained one evening, sitting beside his son on the couch. She's a hero. A real-life superhero who taught me that true wealth isn't about money or possessions. It's about the connections we build and the love we share. The boy nodded, hugging Rosa tightly. I know, he said simply. She's the best, and she was. Rosa may have started as a maid, but she ended up being so much more: a second mother, a teacher, a friend, and a beacon of hope. Her story proved that love knows no boundaries, that kindness can bridge even the widest gaps, and that sometimes the most unexpected acts lead to the greatest blessings. As the family stood together, watching another sunset paint the sky, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Because in the end, it wasn't about perfection, it was about connection. And in that connection, they had found their greatest treasure of all.